Love that riff. So hey everybody, Scott from Demand Frequency here, and we do say hello to you people who follow Frequency. We appreciate you and thank you. And this is also to you guitar enthusiasts out there. Today we're looking at acoustic guitars, okay? The Gibson Hummingbird. Classic, beautiful, amazing instrument, right? Remember the Lies album from Guns N' Roses and Slash is banging on one of those and just amazing stuff, right? But here's the problem though with the Gibson Hummingbird. Never mind my dogs too, they're needy, but you know the Gibson Hummingbird begins at what, $2,500 maybe, and they go up from there. Yeah, even used, they're up there. So, you know, Gibson has given us Epiphone, which I have one in my hand that we're going to check out. Of course, they're made, this is an Indonesian-made one. There's also Chinese-made ones, right? They're kind of around in how they make them. Also, maybe you wondered, and I have wondered, so we spent a little bit of money on it, to check out Temu. Oh yeah, Temu. Honestly, the guitars that we've witnessed from Temu are really nice. Jimmy, who's in our band, and myself, you know, we've messed with a few of those, and they're really nice once you work on them a little bit. Anyway, we have a basic Temu Hummingbird, and we also have a Cathy Hummingbird. If you're familiar with Cathy, if you're not familiar with Cathy guitars, they're out of China, and they are like superior builders, kind of from the basic Temu, if I'm explaining that right. Go do a little research on Cathy. Cathy Zong, I believe, and you can learn all about that on the internet. So no time to waste here on that. So we're going to compare the three because they do claim that the Cathys are nicer than the basic Temu ones. So it's worth checking out. All that with the Epiphone. We're going to compete, right? I have an Epiphone in my hand then. Anyway, some tech talk real quick. I restrung all of them and checked out the truss rods on all of them. They all have truss rods. Number one, right? One thing that is very noticeable from a tech standpoint is the tuners on the Epiphone, I think, truly are superior. They are Grover branded, but so are the other two. You know. Anyways, the tuners are smoother and they feel better turning them, and I think the ratio is better on them. Also, I noticed the truss rod is a little bit smoother on the Epiphone. It is. The only thing that was weird, the bridge pins on the Epiphone go in tight, how you want them to. Here's the weird part. You know, you take your string winder, has a little deal there on it, made to take your bridge pins out on an acoustic. If you didn't know that, you're welcome. You use your tuner and it has that little divot thing made for the bridge pins on an acoustic. I took two different winders, and the bridge pin ends on the Epiphone are too small. I don't know, so I had to actually stick my hand in the thing and give a little encouragement from the back end of it to get the pins out. The Cathy and the Temu were both fine in that regard with fitting on the average string winder, you know, bridge pin thing. So that's kind of weird, but overall hardware wise, I'm going to give the Epiphone the winning score on that. So we're going to look at the three guitars unplugged. One other thing, the pit guards, okay? That's where the Hummingbird is, right? That's the beauty. It's what makes it a Hummingbird, I guess, right? Because there's a Hummingbird on it. And I once have a dove on them, whatever. It's funny because this Epiphone one, the pit guard's really nice. It's raised, it's thicker, it has some contour to it, you know. The cheaper Temu has the same pit guard. It too is thicker, has a contour, it's nicer. The Cathy is really thin. It's a lot cheaper pit guard on that. And Diana didn't like that because that's her guitar. It's like, why is the pit guard like that? Anyhow. Cosmetic, yeah, but that's just something to know. So look, unplug real quick. Now, we'll see what you're able to hear from my living room to the phone to you. You know how that goes on your phone speaker. But hopefully you can hear a difference, and I'll give you my opinion. So here is the Epiphone unplugged, right? quickly then, let's move on to the Temu. Try to get a good look. Oh boy, that's not legal. So here's this. This one does have a Fishman system in it. I have heard a lot of conflicting talk that it might be a knockoff Fishman, but that just seems like an awful lot of work for somebody in China to do. I don't know. Look it up, and you can fire back in the comments if maybe you know more than I do about that. But I mean, it sure looks legit. I did look up that model of Fishman, and it is an actual model of Fishman. So, however that works. And we'll get to plugged in here in a minute, talk more about that. But here's this one, unplugged. This is the straight up Temu, okay? So. Right off the bat, these two similar. I do think that this cherry one, the Temu one, is a little bit dull. But check this out, you guys. This is the Cathy. Remember, Cathy is making stuff in China very much like what Temu is doing, but it's known that there's a little bit extra craftsmanship and things like that. So here it is, unplugged. Again, you see the pick guard, and this has the same Fishman that one does, okay? And all that. Beautiful guitar though. They look great. All of them do. But here you go. Might be out of tune to hear on that, but right, a few chords banging out. This one resonates really nicely. Honestly, Diana and I have talked about it ahead of time, and we think unplugged, that this Cathy wins on unplugged tone. It's got a crispness to it. It's louder. The sustain rings more. It's more musical, When you're playing an acoustic, you need to have some of those things for playing songs, right? Music is dynamic, and your instrument should be able to compensate dynamics. So, we do think that the Cathy is the winner in that as far as unplugged. Hopefully you can hear a little bit of that on your end. We're going to go plugged in. With the Epiphone, I have a little Fender Acoustasonic 90. Not an expensive fancy amp by any means, but you know what? I gig this thing with the acoustic band, and it's pretty cool. I am not exactly sure what the electronics are in this Epiphone. Maybe you do. But this is the job with the two knobs inside. You're getting a tone knob and a volume knob, okay? What I normally do is I let the amp do the EQ work, and when I play guitars like this, I just crank the volume and the tone up, right? Rock and roll, right? So here's the Epiphone plugged in. That's pretty good. One thing I want to make a note of that I have a problem with acoustics when playing live is I'm playing lead and solos on my acoustic when I'm performing with frequency 0.5, okay? And one problem I find a lot is that the high E is quieter than the other strings. And I mean, I'm using that a lot in soloing, but listen to this. Right? This isn't too bad. Honestly, this Epiphone, you notice the high E is a little quieter, but it's not too bad. So there is that. There that is plugged in. The Epiphone sounds pretty darn good plugged in. It really does. You can't really go wrong for the dollar amount on those Epiphones, and huge market too. So here is the straight up Temu. We call this one cherry. You know why? Because it's kind of a cherry finish, right? We're pretty complicated around here, aren't we? So, turn the amp back on. Now, understanding that the electronics on the Epiphone are different, So I have this guitar and the other guitar. They're the same Fishman. I have them set the same, okay? And I have the volume set the same on them. The volume is 3/4. Everything else is straight up at noon, okay? So here's the Cherry, the Temu. Right? And then here's this high E thing. Listen to this. Hear the high E? Listen to the D. The high E is a lot quieter on this one. In fact, I've even moved the wire around under the bridge, and it helped. It was worse than that, and it helped, but it's, for me, I wouldn't be able to gig that because I just can't hear the high E string. You know, you're playing a solo, and it's like, wait a minute, where's the high E string? So that's kind of a problem for me. But I think tone-wise, it even plugged in, this one's just kind of dull. It's duller, not as crisp, doesn't have some of the clarity. And here we have the Cathy, which won, our opinion anyhow, with Unplugged, right? And this is set exactly the same. There it is now anyhow. And here is the Cathy plugged in. I think it maintains that crispness, and there's a little bit brighter tone. I didn't do it with the Temu, but even sustain. Listen to that. You can, in the words of Nigel Tufnell, you could go out and get a bite. Yeah, it would still be ringing when he came back. Let's check out the high E issue, okay? That isn't bad. It's probably as good as the Epiphone in that regard, right? I think so. So here, A, high E. And yeah, I understand that. There's thicknesses in the strings and all that. But, overall though, I'll use a compressor out live sometimes. That helps a little bit, not as much as you might think. For me anyhow. So anyways, there they are. That should be a B. There. Gotta have the resolve, man. Anyways, that's the 3 guitars. They all look great. Honestly, they all were able to be set up quite well too. Nothing worse than grabbing an acoustic and you look at the action and it's like this high and you're like, oh man, what am I going to do? My fingers are going to bleed and die and These play nice. The necks all feel quite well. I mean, there's not one out of the other that feels necessarily better. They're all set up quite nice, and that's just with the truss rod work and all that. They all have 11s on them, the same strings on them, GHS, bright, bronze, something like that. So anyways, that's what you got. If you have any, you notice something in the video, let us know. I love talking guitars, so definitely. So that's what we got. We've got the Cathy Zong. Check them out. We've got the Temu. Don't be afraid of Temu. They have warehouses in the U.S. No tariffs. No trouble being on a boat, right? There's some pretty good stuff for the money, definitely. I'm not going to go into the argument of Chibson and all that, which these are, but honestly, they make some pretty nice stuff. I'm personally gigging a couple of things from Temu. I've had to redo the electronics in them, yeah, but $300 in a guitar I can do a gig with. That's pretty cool, next to some of the high-end stuff I have. So anyways, Epiphone of course is available everywhere. I wouldn't be afraid of those either. They can be set up to play nice, they sound good, and they're not gonna cause you to have to get a bank loan to buy a Gibson. So anyways, one thing real quick, I will say, I'm not going to go bash anything or anybody's guitars, but I've been to guitar centers in Nashville and at the Gibson garage in Nashville, and times that were down there. And I've had Gibson Hummingbirds in my hand. I've had a Gibson Hummingbird that was a $3,000 or so guitar. The fret ends about ripped my hand off. That's not cool. The tone of the Gibsons can be a little bit dull. So maybe you can tell me if there's something I need to know about a hummingbird. Is a hummingbird made to be a little mellower? I don't know. I guess I need to research myself, right? But just to compare, you know, the Gibson stuff is not like, oh man, that's just like, ooh, there it is, holy grail. Not necessarily always. A lot of money. Well, these are pretty nice. So, anyways, take care. You know, what's the Hulkster say? Take your vitamins, say your prayers, and do your homework. Man, that's a loss, isn't it? So, hey, take care. Come see Frequency when you can. Comment on the video below. Make the comments nice and friendly and productive, right? So, anyways, take care, and we will see you at the next Frequency or Frequency.5 show. See ya.